Behind the Curtain with Jack Berkman.
Welcome to Behind the Curtain. Remember, if you want to take it behind the curtain, you call us 703-795-5364, 703-795-5364, taking your emails, jackberkman2016@gmail. If there's an issue that you want to bring to Washington, you bring it to Behind the Curtain, and we will do it for you. We're joining us now, Dr. Bonner Cohen, whom we've had before on Behind the Curtain, Senior Fellow with the National Center for Public Policy Research, and we are going to talk all about the California forest fires and a lot of things, unless you're one of our listeners in California, you may not know about. Doctor, welcome.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Well, this thing in California, you know, I have clients out there, I know people out there. This thing has turned into the ultimate in just chronic misinformation. I mean, the forests now in certain places have become denser than in the 17th century. The reason is that the enviros prevent us from doing proper trimming of the forest, proper deforestation. These things grow out of control, and it's so bad to the point where the fires are now coming down past the 405 into Malibu and now into Beverly Hills. It's a circus.
Yes, it is. And California's environmental policy and its complete mismanagement of its natural resources has transformed forests into tinderboxes because they have not allowed dead and diseased trees to be removed, nor have they sufficiently removed overgrowth of underbrush, nor have they allowed for sufficient numbers of fire breaks, prescribed burns, and all the other precautionary measures that can be taken to limit the damage of a wildfire. Once that wildfire occurs, they have allowed a situation to come into being yet again, because this has happened year after year, decade after decade, that this time has led to substantial loss of life. I think we're over 80 people now confirmed dead, with another 600 or 700.
And we lay those deaths right at the feet of the Sierra Club and all of those other nutty groups that prevent us from doing the deforestation, the logging, and all the proper things that need to be done, right?
That's exactly right. In the forthcoming lame duck session of Congress, there is a farm bill. In the House version of that bill, there is a provision that will allow for the removal of greater numbers of dead and diseased trees. That provision is not yet in the Senate bill. The interesting thing about this is already encountering the stiff resistance of environmentalists who simply say, oh, this is nothing but a giveaway to the logging industry. No, it's an effort to try to save lives.
Now, there's another whole dimension to
ironically,
this.
Save the environment.
And it would seem to me there's another whole dimension to this, and it's kind of the same issue as the water issue. We've seen Governor Brown, Jerry Brown, there's nothing he likes better than a water crisis, because over the years, he and his dad, and Pat Brown did this before him, Pat Brown did this stuff in the 1960s. Reagan brought this up in the 66 campaign, if I remember correctly. They love a water crisis because they go to Washington and it's an excuse to demand federal money, and it usually works. It usually works. And now they're doing the same thing with the forest fires. And I saw a photo the other day of Governor Brown talking to Governor-elect Newsom, and he's whispering in his ear. They're teaching Gavin Newsom how to do all this.
Yes, and therein lies a huge problem for the people of California, because we have absolutely no reason to believe that Mr. Newsom is going to be any better than Jerry
He might be
Brown.
worse.
He might be worse, although that stretches the imagination. Jerry Brown recently blamed climate deniers, saying that they had responsibility for the forest fires in California. As a matter of fact, the California climate is doing exactly what the state's climatological record, which can be easily assessed on the internet, should tell Governor Brown and everyone else that the climate is going to do. Namely, it's a dry climate, it has high winds, and when somewhere a fire breaks out on grasslands, chaparral, in the forest, wherever, unless precautionary measures have been taken, and in California they most certainly have not been taken, then a catastrophe will ensue. And rather than blame others for his own shortcomings, unnamed climate deniers, Brown, in keeping with environmental dogma, simply says, "Oh, this is all about climate change." It has absolutely nothing.
It's interesting in this case. These fires are so egregious, and there's so many deaths. These groups like the Sierra Club, you notice how silent they have been. Usually, with these tragedies, they're out there blaming it on global warming, right? But this time, they've been a little quiet, haven't they?
Yeah, I think the loss of life has actually kept them quiet, and so they would prefer to just ignore the thing altogether, which yet again shows what hypocrites they are, because after all, they would have the world believe that they are concerned about the environment. Well, look at the environment in those areas of California that have been scorched by these horrendous wildfires. There has not only been a loss of life, there has been a loss of human life, there's been a loss of wildlife. Thousands and thousands and thousands of acres of trees are now gone. That is environmental damage. It's something that the environmentalists would have you believe they want to prevent, when, as a matter of fact, when it actually happens, they look the other way.
Let me ask you this now. Where do you see this going? How bad are these fires? I mean, this is way beyond the usual season for this. We're going into December. This is unprecedented. How bad will this get before it ends? Is it going to get worse before it gets better?
As far as this year is concerned, we are probably, and we certainly hope we are, at the end of it. But unless California changes its ways and reverses its policies, yes, this will be the end of it, or close to the end of it this year. But what about late summer, early fall next year? That's the fire season. That's when California historically is at its driest point. That's when the winds kick up. And unless the state manages its natural resources better than it has done before, all we're going to see a year from now is, I'm afraid, a repeat of what we are seeing now.
Let me ask you this. Most of these fires, the core of the fires, are they happening on state and federal lands, or are they originating on private lands? Where is the origination
of them are occurring on state and federal lands. And that they comprise around 50% of all the land in California. Well, that tells you something. State and federal land managers are not the greatest stewards of the environment, and they never have been. They have to operate under regulations that are in place. At least private landowners with a sense of forestry that you won't find in a bureaucracy can try to take whatever measures they can to limit fire damage, but even then they have to get permits from the California state government.
The other issue in this is, why is the state, I mean, it's almost like hurricanes. I'm amazed that after a century of these fires, California is, well, more than a century, but a century with California being populated, I'm amazed that the state government is not more prepared to deal with this. I mean, everything, it's like a hurricane. Everything automatically becomes FEMA, federal. California is the 7th largest economy in the world. It can't deal with a forest fire. Something is wrong with all of this.
Yes, and there's so many reasons why this has happened. Just look at the demographic patterns in California. It has become so expensive for people to live along the California coast, thanks to zoning restrictions, NIMBY laws.
NIMBY, I like that. I haven't heard that one in a while.
Gone through the roof. So what have a lot of these people been forced to do? Move to the interior. But when they move to the interior, where the state of California, and to a lesser extent the federal government, manages the land, they are actually moving into harm's way. Many of the people who burned alive the past few days were people who had previously lived in coastal areas, which are somewhat more secure from fires, and yet can no longer afford to live there. They're, in a sense, refugees from the coast. This is yet another area of policy that California, at both the state and the local level, has to address.
Dr. Bonner Cohen, Senior Fellow with the National Center for Public Policy Research, enlightening us on the scam that is the California forest fires.
All the stories and controversies that no one talks about, but everyone should know about.
Some people without brains do an awful lot of talking.
Behind the Curtain with Jack Berkman.
Time now for one of your favorite topics on Behind the Curtain, immigration. Joining us now, David Bier, immigration policy analyst at the Cato Institute Center for Global Liberty and Prosperity. I love that. I love that name, David. Welcome.
Thanks for having me on.
Global Liberty and Prosperity. Well, we have a lot of prosperity. I don't know if we have a lot of liberty around the world, but we can save that. I'm not even sure we have liberty here at home in the United States, but we can perhaps save that for another time. But you at Cato, I'm sure you're fighting for liberty, right?
Absolutely. We're the leading libertarian think tank in the world.
You are fighting for liberty. You won't hear that a lot. You won't hear that word. That's a 19th century word that you don't hear a lot in 20th century and 21st century elections. But anyway, let's talk about this now. Immigration. Strange things starting to happen now. We're seeing, because of fear of what Trump might do, I think what we're seeing are both legal immigrants, that is, people with citizenship, people with green cards, trying now to migrate to Canada, leaving the U.S. out of fear. They're going north. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, so this is an interesting phenomenon that certainly started in 2017, picked up again in 2018. And that is, you're seeing people with legal status, but typically temporary status of some type, and they're actually crossing into Canada to request asylum there. And so some of their kids are actually born in the U.S., and so they're U.S. citizens by birth, but they are seeking asylum with their families in Canada. And we've seen over 2,500 U.S. citizen children applying for asylum in Canada with their parents. And these are claims coming from all around the world. You have Syrians leaving the U.S. You also have predominantly Haitians with temporary protected status. They received this status after the earthquake in Haiti, and now they are actually being told by the Trump administration that they will cancel that status. And so now they're fleeing the country, essentially, and going to Canada to try to get asylum there so they don't have to go back.
Give us a sense of
Haiti.
Numbers. What kind of numbers are we looking at on this? Any sense?
We don't have a perfect idea about how many people overall have gone from temporary status in the U.S. to apply in Canada, but it's somewhere in the tens of thousands of people have moved from the United States to Canada to seek asylum.
So do you see this continuing? Now, if let's say Trump wins another term, frankly, I think it's likely. It could be close. I think it's likely. Do you think this will continue? Are we likely to start exporting a lot of people north?
I certainly do think that it will continue. At this point, these people still actually have their temporary status. And so when you look at the other policy changes that the president has made with respect to immigration, whether it be increasing deportations, but also canceling the temporary status of not just people from Haiti, but now it's El Salvador. That's over 200,000 people who will lose their status as a result of that. And then you have the DACA dreamer population. That's over 600,000 people who are going to lose their status. So there's a lot of people now who had status, and now they're going to be losing status. And that's going to create a big potential for people who might want to see if Canada is a little bit more open to letting them stay.
What kinds of people are these? Are these doctors and lawyers? Are these people that we would want out of the country? Are these people that are helping the country? Are these people that are hurting the country? Do you have a sense of what kinds of people we're losing?
Well, we actually do have some pretty good numbers about their employment rates, employed at much higher rates than the native-born, U.S.-born population. So you're talking about 75% are employed compared to, in the low 60s for U.S.-born Americans. So they are working at much higher rates. The temporary statuses that they have, whether it be DACA or this other temporary protected status that Haitians have and Salvadorans have, those statuses do not entitle you to benefits in the United States, from the federal government at least. And so they're very limited in what types of benefits they can get, and they're working at very high rates. So I would argue that they are an economic benefit to the country, and there's really not a good economic case for trying to
Let me ask you this.
Get them out of the country.
Is there a way to target and incentivize people? I mean, obviously, there's of the pool of immigrants, legal and illegal, there are people in the country we want, and then there are people we wish weren't here and never came here. Is there a way to incentivize people we don't want without rounding them up to go home? Either south of the border, north of the border, back to where they come from? Is there a strategy that could be pursued like that? In other words, we always present maybe a false choice, the choice between rounding them up with ICE and Department of Justice or nothing. But maybe what we could do is incentivize people to get out of the country. What about that as a strategy?
Certainly attempts have been made, and they have not been very successful. So, if you're talking about the E-Verify program, which essentially requires employers to jump through another hoop in order to hire someone in the United States, whether a U.S. citizen or otherwise. That program's been mandatory in several states across the United States now for multiple years, and it hasn't had a big effect in those states. So you're talking about Georgia, Alabama, Arizona. They've really tried these experiments, and after an initial, fear, the immigrant population gets scared and some of them leave. But after that, it seems like it doesn't have much of an impact. And that's probably because it's so easy to get employment off the books or employment under an assumed identity. You borrow your friend's, driver's license, you can get a job anywhere in the United States. So it's really not that hard to get a job in the country, and that's why you have such high rates of employment among the illegal population across the country.
I want to shift gears in the 2 minutes remaining. Now, this Tijuana, the caravan has reached the point of Tijuana, Mexico. It's almost a humorous situation because I guess U.S. troops and other forces are blocking its entry into the United States. Now the people in Tijuana don't want this caravan, and they're trying to send it back south. It's turned into a circus in Tijuana, has it not?
Oh, absolutely it has. And I would argue that it's pretty staged at this point. And, if you look at what the administration has been doing along the border with San Diego and Tijuana, it's really they've said you can't cross the border illegally to turn yourself in for asylum claims. We're not accepting more than a couple of families a day through the legal ports of entry. And so you have this huge backlog now of thousands of people who are essentially homeless in Tijuana. And yeah, Tijuana doesn't want a big population of homeless people who are waiting to try to get into the United States. It's really the Trump administration's policy of turning people away at those ports of entry and saying we're not going to take any of these people that's creating this backlog, which is creating this, problematic.
Well, do you think we should, in other words, are you making the argument we should let the caravan in? Is that your position?
My position is that they should be processed through legal ports of entry. They should have their background checked. They should have their day in court. And
yeah, but we know 95% of them are just 95% of them couldn't be admitted, right? These would just be illegals. Isn't that what the caravan is?
Well, certainly not under the U.S. law. I mean, U.S. law allows anyone to apply for asylum. They are given an interview where the U.S. government, Trump administration, will interview them, conduct a background checks, and identify whether their claims are credible or not. And if they're not credible, then they get sent immediately back to Honduras or wherever. And if they are credible, then they can stay and go through the court system. And at the end of that process, then we decide whether they can stay permanently.
That's too much. We're getting into too many costs. I don't want to pay for that stuff. I don't want to pay for. Do you want to pay for all that? I don't want to pay for that.
I mean, the cost side of things is not the issue. The issue is whether the Trump administration is going to spend billions of dollars trying to keep them out, or whether he's going to allow them to come into the United States through the legal process that we've established through.
Where they can rob, cheat, and steal. David, we may have a disagreement on that. Thank you, David Bier, immigration policy analyst at the Cato Institute Center for Global Liberty and Prosperity. I guess they like a lot of process, even for illegals. Thank you.
This is a universe where everything is depicted as a Washington Post political cartoon.
Behind the Curtain with Jack Berkman.
Welcome to Behind the Curtain. Remember, if you want to take it behind the curtain, you too can be a Washington player. You just call us. We'll take your issue behind the curtain, 703-795-5364. 703-795-5364. We take your emails now, jackberkman2016 @gmail.com. Jack Berkman 2016, all one word, at Gmail. Same number, same email. If you know anything about the Seth Rich murder mystery, we will never quit on the Rich family, never quit on the city of Washington, and never quit until we find the killer or killers of Seth. Joining us now, Chris Edwards, Director of Tax Policy Studies at Cato and editor of downsizinggovernment.org. What a noble blog that is, Chris. Downsizinggovernment.org. I commend you.
Thank you very much, and hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, so far I haven't been too successful in
I think government
downsizing the government, so I'm still working on that.
No, I think it will grow and grow, sadly. I think it's the Leviathan. The Leviathan grows and consumes all in its path, doesn't it? Well,
that's right.
Now, we got kind of an interesting topic. Now, Amazon, everybody knows Jeff Bezos, richest man in the world. Amazon, probably the richest company in the world, although its stock's taking a hit now. It's got its big California headquarters. It wants to come east, and it has decided now, you correct me if I'm wrong, to put a big facility in New York and then to put another one right here in Arlington, Virginia, where I live, work, and tape. And we want to go behind the curtain, behind the scenes, to see what's been going on in New York and Virginia and D.C. to get Amazon here. Tell us what you know.
Well, this sort of what's been going on the last few years is, or at least the last year, is Amazon's been going around the country and soliciting bids for locating 50,000 of its workers in an expansion. And a lot of the big companies do that these days. They essentially shake down cities to try to get as much incentive money or tax benefits and spending benefits as they can. And Amazon, decided finally to choose New York and Northern Virginia for its split its new headquarters in two, and they've got billions of dollars of subsidies from both jurisdictions, which I think it's not good. It's not. That sort of handout is not good for the economy, and I think it's completely unfair, especially to small businesses that don't get those kind of special subsidies.
Now, let me ask you this. What kinds of things? So do you know anything about, right here in Arlington, Virginia, now what I'm hearing is that the state of Virginia and a variety of municipalities and counties put together a whole package of things for Amazon, and these included local tax breaks, state tax breaks, county tax breaks. The biggest thing I'm hearing Amazon wanted was to be exempted from a bunch of regulations, might have been environmental, and the construction of their centers, something like that, a lot of exemption from regs. What are you hearing about all that?
Well, I think that's all true, and I think there's job training subsidies in there. The New York subsidies are actually bigger than the Virginia subsidies. In New York, Amazon's getting $900 million from a city relocation and employment assistance program.
Jesus.
They're getting $400 million from an industrial commercial abatement program. They're getting $500 million in special tax credits for creating jobs. This is ridiculous. I understand if a city government wants to do something like expand bus or subway service, or create, put in a new highway interchange or something, if a big employer is coming to town, that's fine and that's reasonable. But giving all these benefits like job training and special tax cuts is completely unfair to the businesses that are already in New York and Arlington that aren't getting these benefits.
I guess you say that, though, but how many jobs will Amazon bring to New York? What's being brought there in the way of opportunity?
Well, they're claiming that they're going to create $25,000 in each city, but I think
you mean 25,000 jobs. 25,000 jobs.
25,000 jobs. But you know what? Businesses often make these big job promises, and then they actually, business conditions change down the road, and they reduce the number. So in Wisconsin, for example, there's Taiwanese electronics company, Foxconn, promises giant new manufacturing facility in Wisconsin, and Governor Scott Walker was behind that deal. And Foxconn, over the months has, keeps lowering the number of jobs it says it's going to create. Frankly, I don't think it's any of the government's business how many jobs businesses create, and they shouldn't try to micromanage it. They should have low, simple tax rates and regulations for everyone and let the market create the jobs.
Well, yes. On the other hand, if they can, but states, I'm with you. On the other hand, there might have been other states bidding, like you have a race to the bottom, right? What if Georgia, South Carolina, and Florida are all bidding, right? I might agree with you, but if you let them, then it goes to Atlanta.
I agree that there is sort of a bit of there's a sort of a cancer that has spread here with all these states and local governments offering all these incentives. The most infamous ones are the Hollywood film tax credits, where just about every state offers all these special tax breaks and incentives for businesses, for Hollywood movies to shoot there. Detailed economic studies have found that these don't really create durable.
So what you're saying is
jobs.
Like maybe de Blasio in New York or the governor here, Northam in Virginia, they want to do a quick media hit announcing the jobs, and then down the road they don't care anyway because they're not in office.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And like I said, it's unfair to existing businesses. So consider Amazon coming to Northern Virginia. They're going to be hiring thousands of new tech workers, and they're going to be drawing a lot of those workers away from other existing companies. But it's an unfair that would be fine if it was the marketplace. But if Amazon's getting special tax breaks and job training benefits from the government, it's really unfair for them to be drawing workers away from companies that pay the full rate of taxes.
Okay, but for Cato, wouldn't you rather some taxes be cut than no taxes be cut? I mean, wouldn't that be the standard Cato position?
Exactly. So what we ought to think about is how could New York and Virginia use this $2 or $3 billion instead of giving it to one company. They could have cut, and they should have cut, tax rates across the board. New York, of course, is infamously high tax rates. Over the last few years, finance company after company has been leaving New York and going to places like Florida and Tennessee where there's no income tax. Virginia's taxes are actually not as low as people think. Virginia's got a big so-called business occupancy tax that's pretty high. So they could have and should have slashed those taxes.
Well, that's because the state's getting richer.
Of small and medium-sized companies.
That's because the state's getting richer and bigger, I guess.
Yeah, well, Virginia's economic policies aren't that great. They really, of course, they benefit from the massive presence of the federal government and federal contracting here. You take that away, actually, and Virginia really isn't that great for a business.
Well, yeah,
it's a medium tax state.
If you take away the defense industry, Virginia basically becomes a state like Kentucky. That's the difference between Virginia and Kentucky.
I think
that's where it would be. It would be in the
true.
Kentucky bin. That's about what it is, right? So okay, go ahead. Sorry.
You want to know an interesting comparison? As I've looked at you look at the detailed migration information where Americans are moving. Kentucky, Tennessee, similar sorts of states, they're neighbors, both partly in Appalachia. Tennessee's low taxes, no income tax. It is booming. Nashville's booming. Businesses from all over are moving there. Kentucky is actually a high-tax state. Everyone's moving out. There's a really dramatic side-by-side comparison right there on the other side of the mountains.
So Amazon now, these are firm decisions. They're definitely coming. These decisions are made. Virginia, Arlington, and New York City. It's finalized.
That's what they say, but I would say that I bet in the long term there isn't 25,000 jobs created.
All right, but to play devil's advocate,
companies always overpromise, and you know what? Business conditions change. Everyone thinks Amazon is going to be the giant monster business forever. I bet they're undercut down the road.
Well, that's true.
Everyone thought that IBM would always be the king of computers. There's constant dynamism and change in that industry.
Well, but let's play devil's advocate. Let's say they only create 13,000 jobs. Even at that, if you take it out 15 years, 20 years, it would be a huge windfall for both states, right?
I agree. It's good for the state economies, but I would have rather taken that few $1 billion of subsidies and instead slash tax rates across the board. So I would rather, for example, in Virginia, 25 companies, each with 1,000 jobs, than one giant company with 25,000 jobs. I think you create a much more diverse economy and be more durable.
I guess you don't get, it goes back, you just don't get the media hit because tax breaks really don't resonate anymore because that's just the way it is in this country. There's no media hit.
Both Republican and Democrat and liberal and conservative governors and city mayors, they love handing out the subsidies to the big companies. They get the media hit. They get the photo opportunity. So these subsidies are politics. They're not good economics.
Chris Edwards, Director of Tax Policy Studies at Cato Institute and editor of DownsizingGovernment.org. Boy, that's a blog we all have to read. I only wish that some of it could come to fruition, but sadly, folks, I see nothing but government growth over the years. We wish it wouldn't be that way, but it is.
All the stories and controversies that no one talks about, but everyone should know about.
Why don't you get a toupee with some brains in it?
Behind the Curtain with Jack Berkman.
Welcome back. In just a minute, we'll be talking about the ill effects of America's small population. This is a theme that Behind the Curtain has been on for some time. But remember, if you want to take it behind the curtain, if nobody's listening to you, if your local press won't help, call us, 703-795-5364, 703-795-5364. Operators standing by 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday. We're ready to take your call. We're ready to take your issue to Congress, and we'll do it for free. We don't want anything from you. We just want to know what you need. And if your local press won't help you, Behind the Curtain will. Also, remember, same number, 703-795-5364, Jack Berkman 2016 at Gmail. If you know anything about the Seth Rich murder mystery, more coming on that soon. Well, joining us now, Jordan Goodman, frequent, wonderful contributor to this program, personal finance expert, America Money Answers Man. That's like that old thing, Jordan, where you would say toy boat, toy boat, toy boat. Remember that one? How many times can you say money answers man without screwing it up? Welcome, Jordan.
No. America's Money Answers Man. That's what people call me.
I love it. And that is a well-earned and well-deserved title because you are exactly that. Okay, I want to talk. We've talked about so many economic themes with you, but one thing I want to talk to you about today that we haven't talked about, I am very concerned about the smallness of America. And that is, if you look into the future, my feeling is that demography might just be destiny.
Right.
And that's what worries me. How can we compete? Okay, so, we have this left-right battle, and obviously you and I are on the right, and yes, I believe in a free market system, but all of the difference between left and right is the difference between growing America at 1% like a Barack Obama and even 7 or 8% like Donald Trump. But my point is a broader one. If you take a step back and take a deep look, even if we grow at 8% forever, we're still not going to be able to compete with 3 billion plus Asians.
That is correct. And so what's happening is we are not replacing our population. Our birth rate, typically if you have 2 child per family, you replace your population. And we're under that. We're about 1.6, last numbers I heard, because people of childbearing age are either not having children at all, or they're having them later and later in life. And some people are just going childless. So we are not replacing our population. We're getting older and older.
It's even worse than that in that our fertility rates are even lower than Europe, Japan, and Russia. But the problem is we have enough immigration to offset that, whereas Europe really doesn't. Europe has even worse problems with immigration than we do, and Japan and Russia are actually losing people because of the low birth rate. We, too, would be losing people, but for immigration, which brings a whole nother can of worms and a whole nother group of problems.
Well, when we're restricting immigration, both legal and illegal. So that has always been the escape valve for us in the past. And that's why you're seeing labor shortages, Jack, in many areas. But go to construction sites. You can't find people to work at them.
But one of the problems, and it's very controversial to talk about this, so people don't want to. One of the problems is that the top 80% or 85% of the society is basically not breeding. And certainly the top half of the society is not breeding. I mean, it's any society that essentially breeds out the bottom doesn't have much of a future, right? And, if you look back in time, top grade families from the top of society would have 4, 5, 6 children. That was common if you go back 100 years. We're not doing that anymore.
Correct.
That can seal our doom.
It is a problem. I mean, you look at what's happening now in Japan, Italy, other places, similar. I mean, Japan's a very old society in many ways. Actually, another interesting place, Jack, is China. Now, they had the one-child policy for many, many years. I was in China summit recently, and they said, had they not had the one-child policy, there would be 400 million people more in China than there are today because they only had one
child. And it gets
child.
Even worse. The Chinese story is even sadder because if you go back to the Mao days and you look at 1947 to the mid-1970s, you have a situation where, Mao is probably the greatest butcher in history. He probably killed more people than Hitler and Stalin combined. And probably the numbers I'm getting are, I mean, it could be upwards of 100 million plus that he killed. Had you not had that tragic killing, I mean, and had you not done the one-child policy, had you not had the tragic actions of Mao, China could well be over 3 billion people, in which case it would be a total zoo and a total disaster.
Yeah, but I mean, from our point of view, you are correct. You need a growing population to grow the economy. I mean, we're growing at a 4% GDP rate right now, which is pretty amazing considering the baby boom is retiring. 10,000 people a day turn 65.
Trump's done a brilliant job with what he has to work with. But the bottom line in this country, because of the aging population, because of the smallness of it, Trump doesn't have a whole lot to work with. So, I mean, do you think, what are the causes of this? And again, let's get real controversial. My feeling is the main cause of all of this is the feminist movement. Because feminism means we delude ourselves. If you look at the last 50 years, a lot of the growth we've had is because women and minorities have entered the workplace. Whereas if you go back 50 years ago, the only people really working in the United States, at least in full-time jobs, were white males. So you bring women into this calculation, it's easy to see how the country has become a lot richer. We have become richer, but we, in some sense, I would argue, have sown the seeds of our own destruction because we don't have enough children, specifically children from the top half of the society.
Correct. So women, I mean, either they have no children at all, or they certainly wait till their mid to late 30s or even 40s to have one child because they want to establish their careers, which I guess you could say is because of feminism. I think it's good they have careers, but we need children as well. And you're right. Actually, it's interesting. Just this last weekend, I was in Newport, and I was seeing some of the mansions, the breakers and all that kind of thing.
Quite a sight up there.
Big in those days, the Vanderbilts and the Astors, they had big families, and they needed those big mansions.
The Rockefellers, the Mellons, all of them.
Exactly.
All of them.
Today, you wouldn't need those kind of mansions because they don't. Maybe one kid, maybe two. There was a whole story recently about the death of the middle child. There's people not having 3 kids anymore. So it is a long-term problem demographically because the baby boom, which was the biggest, surge of population, is now getting in the retired years and they're receiving benefits. They're not paying into the system as much.
Let's take a careful look at where the world is now. I mean, a lot of people, clearly the U.S. is still number one. China is rising. I mean, would you say in economic terms that we're developing a bipolar world with U.S. and China at the top, or do we still have the U.S. as a hegemon presiding over a multipolar system? How do you see the current world?
No, I think the U.S., we're still number one, and we're throwing our weight around with all the tariffs and all of that. But China is growing, and Europe's doing better, not as much as they could be if they didn't have their kind of rigid policies. But Europe is still very large. For example, Europe just had a big trade treaty with Japan, which was the largest trade treaty ever in human history, a quarter of the world's population there. As far as population growth, it's all happening in India and Bangladesh and poor people. Africa has a very high population rate. So around the world, another place is the Arab world, Egypt and Iraq, very high population, but these people have nothing to do. That's why they have 25% unemployment rates.
Europe and Japan have so many internal problems, and Europe's birth rates are even lower, and Europe has even worse immigration problems with Arab immigration. These societies, I don't see Japan and Europe as having any kind of future. I see them really shrinking on the world stage. I see the U.S. and China emerging. And so let me ask you this. Let's take a look at some of this Chinese economic data, because you're the expert. A lot of this, I don't know how to make heads or tails of it. The U.S. economy is about $18.5 trillion. The Chinese economy is $11.5 trillion on most of the statistics. Now, that's not purchasing power parity. That's just raw numbers. Is the Chinese number of 11 trillion, how accurate do you think that is? Is that inflated? There's been so much growth in the last 10 years. Could the real number be half that? What do you suspect about China?
I think it's inflated somewhat, not half, but I've been there and you can actually see it. There's a huge amount of infrastructure that's been built all over the place in Shanghai. I took the bullet train from Beijing to Shanghai. It's 5 hours, and everywhere you're seeing apartment buildings going up. A lot of times they're empty, but it's part of GDP. So I think maybe they're at 10 trillion, something like that, but they're growing at a faster pace. They're growing at maybe 6%, something like that. Although recently they're taking a big hit. They are losing the trade war. And you've seen this, the Chinese stock market fall sharply, and they're very much of an export-oriented country, and they're getting hurt more by the trade war than we are. We're much less of an export-oriented country than China.
Maybe it's time for the U.S. to use its leverage, just as Trump is doing. Maybe there comes a time when you think more about relative differences than absolute gain.
And that's what's happening. We are using our leverage, and they're not happy about it. Now, whether they concede, I hope they do. I mean, the solution to this whole tariff situation, President Trump is right. If you get either no tariffs or much lower tariffs and fewer protections and
all right, Jordan Goodman, we're going to leave it there. Personal finance expert, America's Money Answers man. What a blessing to have you. We'll see you again soon. Well, thanks a lot, ladies and gentlemen. Remember, even when we're not on the air, you can hear us and see us and read all about us at jackberkmanradio.com and at radioamerica.com. See you next week. But I want to tell you now about something very special. My friends at MyPillow, and we are so proud to represent them. These are, if you have trouble sleeping, these are some of the best pillows you could ever have. They're 100% cotton. They come with a 10-year warranty. My wife and I had trouble sleeping for years. When we had MyPillow, all of that went away. I can't remember the time we got our first 4 pillows. It was a spectacular experience. Now, MyPillow, a 4-pack right now, if you want to buy 4, 50% off, 2 premium, 2 travel pillows, mypillow.com or 1-800-923-8919, 1-800-923-8919, promo code Berkman. Mypillow.com, 1-800-923-8919. If you want to take it behind the curtain, you call us, 703-795-5364, 703-795-5364. Taking your emails, jackberkman2016 at Gmail. jackberkman2016 at Gmail. Same number, same email. If you know anything about Seth Rich. Ladies and gentlemen, even when we're not on the air, you can hear us and see us and read all about us at jackberkmanradio.com. And of course, always at radioamerica.com. Thanks, and my voice is gone.